Now, I want to switch gears a little bit to US and European campuses. We know that billions has been poured into subversion ops by Qatar and the Iranian regime. And we also see these massive protests to an obsessive level, allegedly supporting Palestinians. Of course, the reality is that these movements are supporting Hamas and other terror groups. Can this be stopped? I mean, what is your message to these students who are spearheading this Marxist, Islamist, unholy alliance today in the Western world?
Well, hopefully now that the Jewish community in America woke up and started becoming more active, we will see the deterioration or at least the slowing down of these Islamic groups. Because believe it or not, it was the Jewish community in America that encouraged the growth of the Muslim student associations on college campus. And when I wrote about it in my first book that came out in 2006, titled Because They Hate, and I spoke about the Muslim Student Association and the growth on American college campuses and the money at that time that was being funneled to our universities. I have a whole chapter dedicated to it in my book, which was written in 2005 and came out in 2006. At that time, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, went after me as if I was the enemy to silence me. They not only tried to silence me, but they shut me down out of speaking at any university, including any military college, where I was warning about the growth of the radical Muslim student associations on college campuses. So, the Jewish people are good people. They want to believe the good in all people. They do not want to judge other people. They hope that by showing the Muslim students that we are nice, we are standing with you, we're not going to allow anybody to discriminate against you, ended up building the Goliath, ended up building the monster who finally is trying to eat them right now. So my organization and I have been working on stopping the expansion of the Muslim Student Association and their influence and their recruitment of American kids into their brainwashing of, the Islamic world is the underdog, Israel is Satan, America is a colonial organization, country. And so hopefully now, after the massacre of October 7th, and the whole world watching what happened to the Jews, and then watching the anti-Jewishness. I don't even want to call it anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism doesn't put a face on it. But when you talk about the anti-Jewish people, the hatred of Jews, which is exactly what happened during the rise of the Nazi regime, where they demonized Jews, whether they practice their religion or not. I know a lot of Jews who don't even identify as Jewish. They before October 7th, they don't want to have anything to do with Israel. But now they are waking up, and now they are realizing that while we stood up with Black Lives Matter, the day after October 7th, Black Lives Matter stood up with the Palestinians, not with the Jewish victims. While we stood up with the Muslim Student Association, the Muslim Student Association were cheering Hamas instead of standing up for the rights of the Jewish students on college campuses. So we are seeing a little bit of an awakening in the United States, where those who were opposing people like me and vilifying people like me, who were sounding the alarm about what was happening on American college campuses, are now waking up to say, you know what? Maybe Brigitte Gabriel was right. Maybe she was making a point, and now is the time to wake up and fight it. But Emily, it's easier to fight cancer when cancer is at stage 2. It's much more difficult to fight cancer when cancer has been allowed to spread and continue growing to get to level 4.
Now, I want to ask you about the alarming trend that we're seeing actually on the right. It seems that Qatar has poured an absurd amount of money into some of these conservative causes, and the recent comments by figures like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and others are increasingly conspiratorial, and more concerning, they're sanitizing Islamist terror. What is going on? Why are these so-called America First activists attacking the U.S.-Israel alliance, and what's really behind it?
Well, they are misguided. They are wrong. People like Candace Owens, who basically was propped up by the Jewish donors in the United States, was invited to speak at Jewish conferences in the United States, was made because of the exposure and the platform that was given to her by Jewish organizations in the United States. Unfortunately, Candace Owens has turned against the Jewish people. And I watched an interview with her the other day, and she was talking about, Rabbi, I visited the Holy Land understand. And the rabbi or somebody was showing me how, the Arabs are put like in concentration camps, even in Jerusalem, and they can only live in this area and they can only live in this town. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you talking about? You go to Lebanon, the Christians live in this town, the Muslims live in this town, the Druze live in this town, and that's in Lebanon. You walk into Syria, Egypt, any Arabic country. People of a certain religious sect tend to live in their own communities. That's just the way it is in the Middle East. Israel does not force the Palestinian Arabs to live in this section or this Arabic town. It doesn't tell the Druze, oh, you only can live in Osfia near Haifa. You cannot live in Haifa. They just happen to be more Druze in Osfia than in Haifa. It's just the way it is. Unfortunately, she is reflecting her own experience being raised as a black woman in the United States with the segregation of the black community. And she is implying that as if this is the way it is in Israel, which is so misguided, so untrue, and very ill-informed about the situation in Israel or any place in the Arabic world. Like I mentioned, you go to Jordan, you go to Egypt, you go to Lebanon. The Christians live in this city or this community or this town. The Muslims live in this town. It has nothing to do with one group telling the other group, you're not allowed to live here. It's just the way they are. As with Tucker Carlson and a lot of the other conservatives who are very leery of war, very weary of war, they do not want to be dragged because they thought that standing with Israel is going to drag America into another war in the Middle East long term. It's a very different situation than the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan or any other war that we went and got involved in because we were attacked in the United States. And the situation with Iran, Israel was doing all the work. Israel was doing all the attack. Israel did not depend on the United States. It was great that the United States came to help, but it was the Israeli brains, military, Mossad, IDF, their weapons. It was an Israeli operation, and Israel could have done it with or without America. It was just done better with America, cost less lives lost, and was 100% effective. And so I guess the people on the right who were very concerned about being dragged into another Middle Eastern war, one, underestimated the power of perception in the Middle East and the power of Israel, which I'm so glad Israel showed the whole world that Israel is back. Israel is strong. Israel is the same Israel of 1967 and 1973 that win wars and they go out to destroy their enemy. And now, it's just, we did not get dragged into World War III. But right now, these voices are still misguided. They are listening to, especially in the Candace Owens case, I'm not sure about Tucker Carlson being pulled to the Palestinian, 50,000 Palestinians, are killed in Gaza. But unfortunately, the Candace Owens camps is still thinking that way.
Well, media has become such a large part of the wars in the region today. And at the head of this in the Middle East is Qatar's Al Jazeera network. Well, the West is really eating up Al Jazeera's reporting. This network has had employees who were members of Hamas, who took part in October 7th. And as you know, they have a long track record of supporting terror groups, including Hezbollah, explicitly. How should the West deal with propaganda networks like Al Jazeera?
Well, one, we need to ban them in the United States. I can tell you my organization worked with Congress for the last 15 years, especially when Al Jazeera started airing in the United States, because we knew they were funded by Qatar. We knew they were the mouthpiece of a terrorist regime, basically getting the talking point to brainwash the West, unsuspecting, uneducated Westerners about the situation in the Middle East and brainwash them. But, in America and in the West, and especially now with the internet, one, you have freedom of speech. Two, the world has become smaller because of the internet, because of the exposure. You want to watch anything, you just go onto the internet, log into whatever web address, and you can watch it. What needs to be done in the United States more is a better PR campaign for Israel, putting out the information, using voices that are effective in the media. And here's what I mean by that, Emily. When Israel puts out people doing PR for Israel, you see generals or older men speaking in a very heavy English accent, talking about UN Resolution Article 242, Article 1 and 2. You look at Al Jazeera, they bring in Arabic Palestinians who are fluent in English. They are younger. They are mostly women who are talking about the Palestinian cause. I mean, I'm not sure if you were young enough to remember Hanan Ashrawi. Here's a Christian woman, middle-aged, that the Palestinian Authority and Yasser Arafat made as their representative to the media. And who did Israel have as their representative? All generals speaking with heavy accent, cannot connect to the people. On the other side, you've got Palestinians painting pictures with their stories. Oh, there was a little woman, breastfeeding a baby stuck at a checkpoint because the Israelis would not let her go through with the ambulance for 8 hours, stuck in the heat and the sun, and the poor baby was crying. You can picture those. You cannot picture UN Article 242, Resolution 1 and 2. So we need to stop talking legal mumbo jumbo and dumb it down to paint pictures about the Israeli little children who are being killed by Hamas. The Israeli little children who are so terrorized because while they're playing on the playground, they have so many seconds to run to a bomb shelter when they hear the sirens going off. We need to see more of these images out on the world stage in order to tug at the heart and the emotions of people who are watching this. Because let's face it, people, humans, human nature identifies with emotions. They don't identify with empty words. I can tell you, I've got 2 New York Times bestsellers. My first book, which came out in 2006, was titled Because They Hate. And it's about my life story, leaving Lebanon, going to Israel, living in Israel, and then coming into the United States. And I painted pictures with my words. I talked about my life story. My second book, They Must Be Stopped, Why We Must Defeat Radical Islam and How We Can Do It, came out in 2008. It was a little bit about my story, but the book was informational, educational, about the rise of radical Islamic terrorism across the world, how the internet was used as a weapon to recruit terrorists to spread their message. Which book do you think sold more? Of course, the first book, because everybody identified with the human story. And so the Israeli government would be wise to utilize more women, more younger women who are fluent in the English language, who are able to get on camera and share stories. And let the generals do what they do best. Let them think about war strategy. But when it comes to the media, you've got to be able to understand how to communicate in the 21st century.
Now, before I let you go, I want to ask you one more question. Israel has, of course, taken a lot of heat in Gaza for civilian casualties. This is despite the fact that the estimated combatant-to-civilian ratio is remarkably low for urban conflict. So as someone who has lived through this kind of a war in Lebanon yourself, what is Israel doing that they shouldn't be? And what are they not doing that really needs to happen?
Look, Israel is doing exactly what it needs to do. Israel is doing the right thing. I mean, there has never been a war in the history of humanity where we had such a low level of casualties compared to terrorists who are conducting the war. And yet the world is attacking Israel because the world is going to attack Israel no matter what Israel does. The world hates the Jews no matter what the Jews do. It doesn't matter how many Nobel Prizes they win. It doesn't matter how many things they create for humanity. It's either out of jealousy, out of resentment, out of hatred, out of whatever it is. It's the reality that the Jewish people live with. And every generation has to face this monster over and over and over again, which is so sad and it's heartbreaking, but it's reality and it's been the history of the Jewish people. And I have to share a story with you, speaking about, how the Palestinians are betraying about all the people, all the kids that Israel killed in this war. On Sunday, I go to Costco grocery shopping. So I'm pulling my cart, walking into Costco, and the guy who works at Costco, the guy who collects the carts from the parking lot knows me, knows exactly what I do. He's on the left. So we always have these debates. And he stopped me and he said, "What do you have to say about 50,000 people? 50,000 people died. The poor Palestinians that died, that Israel killed." And I said, "Where are you getting your information from?" I said, "I want you to think for 1 second. You know how when a dead body stinks and it smells really, really bad? And so he said, oh my gosh, yes. I said, if you're walking by a dead animal and there's a cat dead for a week, you can't even smell it, you know? And I said, in earthquakes, you see people walking around with masks because the stench is so bad, they can't even smell it. And I said, how can people still walk in Gaza if 50,000 people died and they don't have to wear a mask? There's no smell. There's no stench. Where are the graves? Where are the funerals? You know, how can you hide 50,000 people dead? And so people don't think about the technicality of the words. They just say, Israel just killed 10,000 people in this attack. How? If Israel killed 10,000 people in this little area, you wouldn't be able to walk into it, especially if there's nobody cleaning the bodies for a month. And so they don't think like that. And so what Israel has to do a better job in showing people that and repeating the message. This is the lowest engagement in the history of humanity, where as little civilians have killed as possible, and give comparison to how many civilians died in World War II compared to how many military men died in World War II, and different bombings, whether the bombing of London, the bombing of whatever around the world. This is the type, again, it's an information war, Emily. We live in the information age, and people listen in sound bites. Israel, and what's mind-boggling to me is the Jews perfected marketing. They perfected Hollywood. They perfected the internet. They created technology, and they do the best advertising for any product. Car companies, shoe companies, hair companies, shampoo companies, Hollywood, the glitz. Yet when it comes to messaging, they all sit aside. It's like they are afraid to defend themselves. And I think they need to do a Hollywood-style campaign to combat this bad public opinion.
All right. Thank you, Brigitte Gabriel, for joining us today and shedding some light on the situation in the Middle East. Pleasure to have you with us on Axis of Truth.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.